Gerald, thanks for coming on. So let's talk about the surge in oil prices. Some are predicting it could go as high as $200 a barrel. What's your assessment?
Well, we don't see it going that high unless, of course, there's an outbreak in a major oil producer such as Saudi Arabia, maybe something happening with Iran, closure of the Suez Canal. But what we're looking at really is very reminiscent of the late 1970s, 1979, when the Iranian crisis broke out. Because there's another element in this that's important. It's inflation. And what we're looking at, as we look back in the 70s, it was high inflation plus the Iranian crisis, an oil spike. You have the same thing going on now. Oil prices were going up before this happened, and it's because of the devaluation of the dollar. Now, here's where it really gets tricky. The only reason this Ponzi scheme continues to go on is because the Federal Reserve has interest rates near zero. What's going to happen as inflation skyrockets and interest rates have to go up because to hold down oil prices and other rising commodities, because these commodities are based in dollars. They have to raise interest rates. The interest rates go up, the economy goes down.
So you're saying the inflation, the role of the Federal Reserve, possibility of oil prices skyrocketing, that this could be detrimental to the U.S. economic recovery, which, let's not forget, the Obama administration seems to be sort of boasting about.
What are they boasting about? How could they boast about it? Look at the unemployment numbers. They said that they would be under 7% by now. I just heard the White House spokesperson, Carney. Carney, by the way, is an abbreviation. It's the word for carnival man, a carny. He said that he didn't want to talk about how they said it would only be 7%. He didn't want to relitigate history. So the reality is it's more like 10%, way over 9, actually 22% according to John Williams. There is no recovery. It's a cover-up. It's only being boosted by these low interest rates, which again, when inflation skyrockets, they're going to have to raise them, and that crashes the economy.
When is that going to happen, Gerald?
It's difficult to tell, but it's underway now. It's underway when you look at China, India. Other countries are already raising their interest rates because of the fears of inflation. In the U.S., they're cooking the numbers. They're saying we don't have inflation. Oh, food and fuel, we're not going to count that. Why not? Well, because we made it up, and we're saying we're not going to count it. And, you know, when they're looking at the numbers and saying, you know, if gasoline goes up X percent, the GDP falls by X percent, that's not the way it works. When people fill up their tank and they see it registering 70 bucks on the pump, you think they're going to go out and splurge?
All of these factors are going to be detrimental to the U.S. economy, to the economic recovery. But at this point, I mean, what can the U.S. government do? What's the solution here?
Well, there is no solution in these terms. And the woman is right that the only reason they're interested with Libya is about the oil. You hear anybody screaming and yelling about all those people last week that were killed in the Ivory Coast or the Sudan? I guess coca wasn't that, you know, much of a national priority. So the only things that could really happen is a real alternative energy beyond wind, solar, geothermal, or biofuel. But in the absence of that, you know, the United States would attack England if it had oil that they needed and the people wanted it, just as they did with Iraq. Remember that one?
So you think that the U.S. will intervene militarily in Libya then?
They'll try anything, exactly. Look, we already heard Hillary Clinton say that they're willing to do anything for anybody in Libya that needs aid. So they're putting it out there already. They're talking about no-fly zones, and the hypocrisy is just beyond the belief. I mean, for example, has anybody called for war criminal trials against Mubarak as they are for Gaddafi? And all of the world is, the Western world are calling for his head, but the other heads in Bahrain and in Yemen and in Egypt are, you know, they're okay. Tunisia, leave them alone. But they're calling for Gaddafi's head. Why? Because it's oil. You'd think we'd be in Iraq if the major export there was broccoli.
Of course, a lot of U.S. interest in Bahrain, to mention just one country there. But Gerald, let's get back to thinking about what this could mean for the Obama administration. A lot of folks say that everything that's going on right now, even in the Middle East, is going to reflect poorly upon Barack Obama come 2012. But, I mean, do the Republicans have a different plan? They don't seem to have any plan.
Now, by the time the elections come, there's going to be a much different story by now. And what's really going on now is we see it. You know, these are only brush fires leading to a much greater outbreak. We're really looking at the first great war of the 21st century. They're not, I mean, look what happened as it was going on, the riots in Libya. How about what's going on in India with the hundreds of thousands of people taking to the streets? How about what's going on in Greece? This is going worldwide. This isn't going to stop. Come November, there's going to be much bigger issues than Libya and oil. It's going to look more like, as I said, the beginning of the first great war of the 21st century.
And of course, it's not just the protests in the Middle East. We have protests in our very own backyard in the Midwest. But Gerald, I have to talk to you about this before I let you go. Bernie Madoff's recent comments in New York Magazine to reporter Brian Fishman saying, look, I'm not the only one to blame here. He says the SEC looks terrible in this thing. It's unbelievable. Goldman, no one has any criminal convictions. The whole new regulatory reform is a joke. The whole government is a Ponzi scheme. So he's saying, what about the SEC? What about Goldman Sachs? Saying everything is a joke when it comes to financial reform. I'm guessing that you seem to agree with him in this case.
Of course. I mean, he also said the game is rigged. We've been saying this forever. I've also said from the beginning, when the panic of '08 began, if the names on Wall Street were named Celente, Caruso, Mondavi, Puccini, Rossini, they call it the mafia. But the White Shoe Boys, the Harvard, Princeton, Yale, Bullets, Bombs, and Banks Club, the Poison Ivy League, hey, hands off, don't touch them. No, it's disgusting what's going on. Hey, who's Obama's chief of staff? Bill Daley, where's he from? Oh, former vice chairman of J.P. Morgan Chase. Who was the Treasury Secretary under Bush? Oh, Henry Paulson. Where was he from? Oh, former CEO of Goldman Sachs. Keep going down the line. You know, Wall Street's hijacked Washington. Hands off for the big boys. Only we, the people, are the ones that have to abide by the laws.
So it's always easier to blame the mob, huh? When in doubt, just blame the mob if you're able to, if the last names fit. But, you know, it's not just Madoff, it's not just you and other folks who are bringing this issue to light. For example, Charles Ferguson, the director of Inside Job, winning the Oscar last night. Here's what he had to say about all of this. Listen.
I must start by pointing out that 3 years after a horrific financial crisis caused by massive fraud, not a single financial executive has gone to jail, and that's wrong.
He makes a good point, right? I mean, those CEOs and executives still raking in massive profits, so not much has changed.
No, and he was so apologetic at it as that. I mean, I thought he was going to cry, and all those little Hollywood whimpercrats clapping. You know, where is the justice? They said we were going to get swift justice. That's the Obama administration said back when they went into office in 2009. As I said, you know, this is the cover of our Trends Journal, the winter edition. Screw the people. The rules are only put in place for us. Everybody else, it's hands off. They're not going to be touched. You just saw Angelo Mazzillo from Countrywide. They didn't bring him up on charges. Nobody gets brought up on charges. And all they do is they get slapped with a fine, and then they say things like, and you can't do business on the Securities Exchange for another 2 years, or something stupid like that after they walked away with $500 million. Look, only a child would believe that these hedge funds and private equity groups make hundreds of millions and billions of dollars because they're so intelligent. The game is rigged. What are you waiting for, somebody to tell you that Santa Claus isn't real?
Well, you know, people are finally sort of taking to the streets because it's hitting them personally in Wisconsin and several other states. And they're saying what you're saying. Instead of going after the hedge funds and the banks, you're going after us. But the way that the game is right now, you're saying it's rigged. Will that culture ever change? Bailing out the banks, when it comes to the people, not so much.
No, because here's what's going on. Here's when it changes. What are the riots going on in Tunisia, in Egypt, Yemen, all throughout the Middle East and North Africa? Why are they demonstrating in Croatia last week and Greece? It's the same principal reasons. High unemployment, a highly educated youth that's unemployed, rising prices, and knowing that the game is fixed. It's corruption at the top. When the money stops flowing down to the streets, to the man on the street, the blood starts flowing in the streets. They're not going to change it. It only changes when the people uprise.
Quite a dire outlook there. Publisher of the Trends Journal, Gerald Celente. Always so great to get your analysis, Gerald. Thank you.
Hey, thank you.